I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darrell Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darrell Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darrell Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darrell Lee makes Christmas better. Welcome to The Five of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. As an author, ad man and theologian, I've always been interested in people's stories. Not just those with a high profile, but people from all walks of life, regardless of fame. Which is why I created this show. Each guest who takes the 5 of My Life challenge chooses a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. It's amazing what you can learn when discussing someone's 5 choices. I hope you enjoy listening to the show as much as I enjoy making it. Today's episode features 5 of the best stories ever told on the show. Actor Rob Carlton, the guilty feminist Deborah Frances-White, Mambo founder Dare Jennings, radio presenter James Valentine, and author Jamila Rizvi all talk about one of their favourite books and what it means to them. Rob Carlton has been a professional actor since he turned 14. A multi-talented entertainer, writer and producer, he's one of Australia's best-loved storytellers. You have with the format because you haven't chosen a book. You actors, you won't follow a brief. But I'm going to let you get away with it.
Thanks.
Because you've chosen a play, but it's a play that you've never seen, you've only read.
That's right.
The people who are listening to this, they need to know the quality of the play that you are going to be talking about. It was written in 1881 and got a number of reviews at the time that it was released. This is from the London Times, from the theatre critic of the time, the best theatre critic. Positively abominable, an open drain, a loathsome sore unbandaged, gross putrid indecorum, literary carry-on, crapulous stuff. Yeah. So it didn't go down well to start with because it's about religion, venereal disease, incest and euthanasia. Ghosts by Henrik Ibsen.
Was that review written in Victorian England?
Yeah.
There you go.
At the time, it was very scandalous because it was about all those things. Yeah.
So I stand by my position. So Ghosts by Henrik Ibsen. I'm going to tell you a story, and the first part of it won't make me look great. Basically, and this is part of an ongoing thing I've been thinking about lately, which is forums in which to tell stories, forums in which to acknowledge one's growth, forums in which we can acknowledge that we aren't born perfect and we're constantly striving to find something. So I offer this story up.
Thank you.
In that spirit. I was, again, an undergraduate. I was living at university. I was living at college, and it was a victory dinner, big celebration. We won some sporting event. It was possibly the swimming we'd won. I was on the team because I was the high diver for the team. Not because I was any good. I was the only bloke at college that liked jumping off high things. Well, I think we can assume that I didn't contribute to any of the points that my team accrued during the meet. Nevertheless, we were celebrating as one. And later in the evening, a young woman from the college tapped me on the shoulder and said, how about you and I go and explore the wonders of our nethers in a private location, which I did. This is terrific fun, great fun. So off I went and, 19-year-old, excited and happy and making sweet, sweet love, which was terrific, but it wasn't my girlfriend. So this was a time in my life where I had a girlfriend for the first time. She'd been away for all of a day. She was going away for the whole weekend, so you can understand how lonely I got, Nigel. She'd gone away for the whole weekend. I really liked this girl, but then I had this offer on the table over here and I took it. And of course I've woken up and I just felt sick. and it was terrible, and I'd done the wrong thing, and I knew I'd done the wrong thing, and I felt bad, and I felt horrible. And I hadn't worn a condom. So there was all sorts of terrible ramifications and risks sort of playing out in my head. And I've got, oh my God, this is terrible, terrible. And I really like my girlfriend, but I've really this up, and I can't let her know, and I certainly can't let her get if I was to get some sort of disease because of the thing. But I can't have sex with my girlfriend. She's coming back tomorrow, and I go, oh my God, I've got to make sure that I don't have any diseases. So I race up to the cross at the time, and I was really worried because at that point, to discover whether you had a non-specific urethritis or any kind of thing, they had to gouge basically. They put a thing down the eye of your belly. Terrible. And I go up there and I walk into the doctor, and I'm a panicked white mess, and I look at the person, I tell them what I've done, I confess, I've done this, I've been a terrible boyfriend.
I'm a doctor, not a priest.
Yeah, that's right. And the doctor looked at me and with a sense of joy told me that there was no way they could get any results for 3 weeks. So you're going to have to sit in your misery for at least that long. And sent me out the door. And so I left there and I go, oh my God, I can't even get a test for 3 weeks. How am I going to not have sex with my girlfriend? So then I'm going home, excuse after excuse. I tell her that, I got this, I got that. I'm going through thousands running around in my head. I got this, I get that. I get back to my room that day and I'm going, oh my God. And I'm trying to think. And then suddenly I stop. You see, for the last 2 weeks, I'd been writing an essay on Henrik Ibsen's Ghosts. And by God, as a passionate literary student, I was writing that essay with every fibre of my being, you know, the kind of painful, nauseating undergraduate passion that comes with an English literature student. And I was belting out this essay, Henrik Ibsen. He knew what was going on because Ghosts, at the very heart of it, is an infidelity that's not been spoken truthfully about. And then as a result, towards the end, spoiler alert, it ends up with the potentiality of incest because the offspring don't know that they're related to them and they may find love in one another's arms, as well as a mother potentially having to euthanize her syphilitic, encephalitic son. And as a student, I knew, and I wrote in that essay, that if we tell lies about the things we do, there is no end to the misery it can cause tomorrow, the next day, the year after that, and for generations to come. So I sat in that bedroom and I suddenly realised this guy who wrote this play 100 plus years ago had a message for me. And it was the very, very first time that a piece of literature, a story, entered into my life, into my body, into my heart, and changed the direction of my action, which was when my girlfriend got back that weekend, she walked into my room and I looked at her and I broke down like the pathetic grub I was. And I said, this is what I have done and I am sorry. Now, I'm not suggesting for an instant that I've got everything right since then. I'm not suggesting for a second that I've lived a life where there hasn't been various indiscretions, whatever it is since then. I'm certainly no, extraordinary role model of behaviour. But to me, that play represents we can choose to engage in these questions, whether they be moral, ethical, whatever, or not. And that play was the thing that made it very real for me, that literature makes life less lonely because we can witness our failures, our failings, our vulnerabilities, as well as our great strengths through reading stories of others.
That has to be one of the dead set best stories on Five My Life I've ever heard, and it sums up what this podcast is about. So thank you, mate, for taking it so seriously and preparing. I have to ask you, how did it play out?
Oh, man. Okay.
That's all right, Rob.
Oh, you got it. Well, of course, this extraordinary woman. Now, we're friends to this day.
Okay.
We're friends to this day. What I learned as that played out, of course, there was misery and heartache and, the kind of sadness that only two 19-year-olds can produce. But she forgave me in a way that I didn't credit at the time. And by that I mean she never once used it against me.
Did she stay with you?
Yep. We had our ups and downs, but she stayed with me and we broke up many years later. She never once used it against me. Not even passively. Not even, well, you did this for her. And to this day, I don't know if I could do the same.
Yeah.
You'd want to think you could. And obviously, with another girlfriend, I got cheated on, and oh my God,
How dare you?
But I then tried to use my girlfriend's behaviour as a model for my own.
Right.
It was like, right, well, if we're going to press on and I want to stay with you in this situation, well, I got to find actual forgiveness. Anyway, that was the first time I guess I witnessed actual forgiveness from someone rather than just lip service and a whole lot of passive aggressive behaviour.
But what an amazing story that a play, book, whatever, could have an impact on how not so much you behaved, but your honesty in recounting that behaviour to people that you love. I think that's amazing. So from then on, you were sort of transparent. You didn't try and keep things under the carpet.
Very much so. And it was, and to be true, I think that moment has governed. I mean, I think I'm an ambassador for the Dymocks Children's Charities. We raise money for kids that can't afford their own books. I'm passionate about sharing stories, and I'm passionate about literature. The one thing all young actors do when they come up to me and say, Rob, how can I be a young actor? I say two things. One, because they go, I'll get an agent, do this. No, don't worry about that. I want you to think about two things. Are you engaged with your community theatre group or Australian Theatre for Young People, or, get a sense of theatre, get it, because then you'll discover whether you love examining text. And other than that, are you reading much?
Right.
Are you reading novels? You've just read widely. And I have no doubt it was because of that tawdry incident all those years ago.
Shame on you.
Deborah Frances-White's The Guilty Feminist is truly a global phenomenon with over 90 million downloads and sold-out shows around the world. Her book choice gives a fascinating insight into the roots of her success.
Now, like your film that I hadn't heard of this book, so I've watched and read both. So it's been a real voyage of discovery, so thank you. But I'm going to just read a review, one of the reviews, because the book knocked me on my backside. One of the reviews says of this book, Improvisation and the Theatre by Keith Johnson in 1979, it says, a mind-opening, mind-bending, mind-caressing and mind-shaping book. My life will never be the same again. And I tell you what, I'm not in impro. I wouldn't be able to improvise my way out of a plastic bag, but it was just sensational. Could you tell us about the book and why you chose it, please, Deborah?
Yes. Well, I was a Jehovah's Witness living on the Gold Coast. And I had at school been right into drama, and I was a champion debater, and I was the third speaker. So I used to have to write my rebuttal. My whole 5 minutes or whatever I got was rebuttal. And so I used to write that while the other team was speaking. So I knew that I was good at ad-libbing and improvising. I used to try and make it funny. Or I did make it funny. It was just that was my thing that I could do. And when I was a Jehovah's Witness, all of that was stopped. Like, you couldn't do anything extracurricular. I only became a Jehovah's Witness while a teenager. That's why I was able to do those extracurricular things that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. I was having to knock on doors full-time and work in a shop or hotel reception part-time. And I didn't have any mental escape. And so, ironically, for a Jehovah's Witness, this book, Keith Johnson's Impro, became my Bible, because it was a little mental escape from the Jehovah's Witnesses are basically a high control group. Everything that you think is thought out for you, and you have to say the party line, and the punishment for leaving is shunning, but you're not allowed any friends outside. And I got hold of this book because I saw theatre sports on the television, and then impro workshops. The people from Le Boîte Theatre in Brisbane Theatre Sports, came down to the Gold Coast to do workshops. And a friend of mine said, shall we go? Now, you're not meant to do that as a Jehovah's Witness, definitely not. But we snuck off and went. And they knew there was something weird about us. We couldn't say we were Jehovah's Witnesses because they would think we were weird. And also we would be bringing reproach on Jehovah's name, i.e. we shouldn't have been there. So don't tell them you're a witness. If you're in a nightclub, don't say you're a witness because, doesn't look good. But they knew there was something weird about us because we couldn't do scenes about sex or any. We were very awkward and quite virginal. I mean, very extremely virginal in my case. But they recommended this book, and I read it in one go, and I would just read bits of it again. And the elders found out we were going to this thing, and that got stopped. Obviously, we weren't allowed to do it anymore. But I was able to improvise like poems in my head and scenarios in my head because of this book. Because what this book does is and now some of it you will find, if you read it now as a Gen Z, some of it you will find the language you might find dated or that kind of thing because it was written in 1979. But it is an extraordinary journey into the mind of Keith Johnstone, who himself was called an uncreative person or a difficult child, and he tells this story of training to be a teacher and being given a lesson by an art teacher, and which they found very difficult. And then he showed the paintings of what he thought were much more advanced students, and they were 8-year-old children. And he realized at that point, he said, I was never the same. I never recovered from it, he said, because I realized my education had worked against me, not for me. And Keith says, people think teachers are all dealing in the same commodity, that bad teachers give you a little bit of a good thing, and good teachers give you a lot of a good thing. And he says they're not. They're dealing in opposite commodities. Bad teachers are destructive. Bad teachers are making you anxious. Bad teachers are making you self-conscious. Bad teachers are teaching you not to trust yourself. And good teachers are freeing you. And when I then got to work with Keith. I left the Jehovah's Witnesses and I got to go to Canada and work with Keith. And I also worked with a brilliant teacher who now lives in Australia, Canadian, called Patty Stiles. And she now teaches and performs in Melbourne. And Patty taught me most of what I know from Keith, but I got to work with Keith and we got to bring Keith over to London quite a few times. And I've worked with Keith a lot over the years. And Keith said to me, when I went to Oxford University, I told him, I said, Keith, I'm going to Oxford. And he went, the thing is with Oxford, he said, he's British, by the way. Places like Oxford, the trouble is they're going to narrow your taste and they're going to make you like fewer and fewer and fewer things. By the time you leave Oxford, you'll only really be able to admire very few things or like or enjoy very few things. Now, a university where they made you like everything and opened your taste up, that would be a university I would be interested in going to. And I was like, it's such a Keith way of looking at the world. It's so brilliant.
I love it.
He's right.
That's what I'm trying to do with 5 of My Life, which is rather than the algorithms recommend things that are similar to other things, is you hear guests mentioning things and talking about things that you might never have read otherwise. So like me reading the book, I love that book, but I would never have read it if it hadn't been for you. Yeah. And one of the things Keith said, which really stuck in my mind and made me want to ask you a question, he said, you can't learn anything without failing. And I want to ask you, how good are you at failing and what have been some of your most useful failures?
Oh, I mean, Keith made me really good at failing. I just watched the Brené Brown Call to Courage, the new Netflix Brené Brown lecture. And I did a gig with her in Nashville, actually, and I saw her talk about this. But she's expanded on it, and she uses that Teddy Roosevelt quote about the critic is not the important man, it's the man in the arena who gets in the arena and sweats and stuff. And she said, I tell people, if you're going to live your life in the arena, you are going to get your ass kicked. And they say, I understand that's a risk. No. It's a certainty. And when she said that, I cried because I was like, every time I fail or, I work really hard on something, it doesn't go, that for whatever reason, it can't move forward. I'm in the arena. I'm having a go at this. I'm in the game. And that's all I really want, is to be in the game, to be taken seriously in the game. I don't have to win every time. Keith once said to me, our improv company got so good. We were doing certain formats that we became excellent at. And then we nearly had our own television show and it didn't go. Someone else took over the TV network, blah, 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 same old story. And we all kind of lost faith a bit, I think. And our shows started to become really eggy and bad and we just couldn't. We were so good. And I was like, what happened? Keith came to watch. I said, Keith, can you come and watch? We're struggling. And he went, the end, he went, yeah. Deborah, it's not enough to be all right with failure. You have to enjoy being bad. And that's the thing, is Keith would say, a clown is someone who fails and stays good-natured. And it's true. If a clown gets in his little car, goes from one side of the circus ring to the other, buys a pint of milk and comes back successfully, will be disappointed. But if he goes halfway across and his wheels fall off his car and he gets out and goes, oh, fucking hell, I'm meant to be an hour for the AA now. This is, how long about it? Then we can see that at home. We can see people angry and frustrated at home. A clown finds it funny or curious, or she's curious that the wheels have come off the car. And the clown tries to put the wheels back on and the wheels keep falling off. But the clown never gets irritated by the clown's failure. And that's what, so Keith always says, if you stay good natured on stage when you fail, the audience will enjoy it because they're not used to seeing that. Patty always used to make us say in class at the top of the workshop, we suck and we love to fail. And I taught students at RADA that, and I'd say, don't say that in anyone else's class, though. They won't get it, but it really does help you. I talk about collecting data when students leave RADA, like RADA's like NIDA, if anyone's not heard of it in Australia, but I say the first year, you're going to get, all you're doing is learning how to audition. What works for you? What works if you go in really confident? What works if you go in a bit low status? What works if you over-prepare, under-prepare, go in and improvise? All you're doing is collecting data. Take notes, take notes, take notes. Your job is not to get a job. Your job is to work out what kind of audition process is right for you. And every time they ring me and go, I got the job, because they weren't going in desperate, going, please give it to me. They were going in curious as to what would be in this room and curious to the process. And that person is more hireable.
I have to say that the book, I mean, I'm not in your game, in your industry, your amazing spontaneity shot, but I think it's relevant to people who aren't. I mean, it's just
skills for life.
That's right. Dare Jennings, the founder of Phantom Records, Mambo and Deus Ex Machina, is quite simply a creative genius. I found the story behind his choice both surprising and moving. I'm fascinated to hear you talk about this choice, mate, because you've chosen Snake, written by your sister Kate.
Yes,
tell us why. Well, tell us about the book first, and then why. I emailed you saying, mate, is this based on your family?
Yeah, well, my sister was a well-known writer. She edited books of poetry. She was a poet. She wrote a lot of articles. But her first book was Snake. And like every good author, they have to kind of settle all their scores with their family. And this was really what this was. Now, and I was completely torn because on one hand, it's a beautifully written book. And, you know, it was said that it was on the shortlist for the Booker Prize shortlist. It was being considered for the Booker Prize shortlist. So it was a very well respected. It's more prose than like a straight novel, but it was beautifully written and incredibly heartfelt. But it was fucking mean. Like it was so. My mother, in particular, because my sister and my mother never got on. I got on wonderfully with my mother, but. So she portrays this incredibly unhappy, vicious sort of
cruel,
woman.
Yes.
Yeah, cruel woman, which was completely undeserved. But my mother used to read the bulletin from cover to cover, and I didn't want her to read the book because it was too horrible. But the opening paragraph of the review for the book was, this is an amazing book, and it features one of the most despicable women in Australian literary history or something. My poor mother, it broke her heart. It was terrible. You can pick me in there because I'm the vacuous, no ideas younger brother. So,
gosh, so your mum's no longer with us?
No, she passed away.
What was the family's reaction when it hit?
Everyone was horrified, and everything in it, just about everything is identifiable as what we did. I was conflicted because it's an amazing book written about my family, but on the other hand, it was just despicable how cruel she was to the people in it. But it's very normal for authors to do this. Their first book is always settling scores.
I mean, I wrote a book nowhere near as successful as Snake, but I was bent over backwards to make the only person who looked bad be me, because I was terrified of making, my mum or my brother. Did your mum and sister reconcile? Did they make up?
Never.
That's so sad.
Yeah, no, it really is. And it's what is kind of extraordinary is that my sister was famous as a groundbreaking feminist in the 60s and 70s. And yet, I think, couldn't you give your mum a bit of slack, kind of in terms of what she grew up with and what she, the stuff that she had gone through, but sadly not.
Her latest book is very autobiographical as well. I mean, it seems to be a theme in her work, dealing with her husband having Alzheimer's and all that stuff.
She tends to write about things she knows about, but but she is a very good writer. There is no two ways about it.
And are you guys close despite it all, or?
Well, I'm turning 70 on the weekend, and
congratulations.
She's in a. Wait till I get there. Still only Tuesday. But she is 72 or 73. Look, we get on, but it's a bit fractious.
Right. And then tell us a little bit about you as a kid. So I've obviously got the wrong impression from that book, but as in a happy childhood, do you think, or?
We were a rural family. My first 12 years were on an orchard outside of Griffith. And my grandfather started the prune industry in Australia, interestingly enough. And then when I was 12, my father got a soldier's settlers block in an area called Collyamberley, and it was like a 700-800 acre irrigation farm. And my father was an overachieving, very ambitious farmer. And sadly, I wasn't. And he, God bless him, but he was a wonderful man. But yeah, he just loved farming. And of course, our whole family sort of disintegrated around him. So I spent most of my youth in a rural environment. People ask me, what did you get from being brought up in a rural environment? I say, a never-ending sense of doom. The city people cannot understand just how harsh life is on a farm. It's just the exposure to everything, from government banks and through to locust plagues and droughts and floods and disease and livestock and plant. I mean, it is quite incredible. To be a farmer, you've got to really want to do it.
I mean, amazing. Career's the wrong word. Just an amazing set of achievements in things that couldn't be further away from farming. I mean, whether it's Phantom Records, Mambo, or Deus. So you go, you sort of went to the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, well, I ran basically because I just knew I had to get out of there. Well, going to university was the thing that got me out. But my poor dad was, because you got to understand, my parents, they survived the Depression, they survived the Second World War. So they had this kind of fundamental view of how you got to lead your life. Like, don't take chances, get ahead as much as you can. And we grew up in I'm teenager in the 60s and just bloody couldn't care less about anything. And my dad was convinced he would have to feed me. Like, he's never going to be able to feed himself. Like, he's hopeless. He used to call me Bob Hope's young brother, No Hope. But that was the attitude of those guys. They got through by the skin of their teeth, and we were just coasting. Like, we were not, everything was going to be fine for us.
James Valentine is a musician, journalist, author and television presenter. In a Herculean feat of multitasking and longevity, he's also presented a hugely popular ABC radio show for over 30 years. So you've set the bar high, but you've raised it with your book because you've chosen Winnie the Pooh. And you're about to hear a grown man cry because I adore those books. Tell me why you have chosen them.
So now we're leaping back in history. Obviously,
1920s, wasn't it?
Well, it's published, I think, 27.
I'm not suggesting you read them in the 1920s.
Right, but in the 1920s. Well, I chose Winnie the Pooh because it's a book I can never remember. I don't remember reading because it was read to me probably by my mother from the editions that she was given as a child. So you had these crumbly sort of hardback editions, which, were beautiful in themselves. The pages are dry and old and yellow and that sort of stuff.
Wonderful drawings.
And then you've got the beautiful E.H. Shepard illustrations, absolutely magnificent. So they're read to me, and then you read them for yourself. And then what I found is that I can go back and, it might be 5 years. Maybe I read them again when I was 12 or something like that and still went, oh, these are so beautiful. And then they remain for me a sort of touchstone of how to write. Like these are, A.A. Milne is like Graham Greene or John le Carré, where they come from this era of the perfect sentence. Every sentence is so grammatically exact without being onerous, It's so light, yet it's so perfect. Like the language is often so light that it's almost like you can skate over the paragraph. You've got to come back and then go, oh, that's so great what you're saying there. It's so beautifully constructed. So it just remains with me as such a beautiful thing. And it's like a lot of your first experiences. This is the first book I really loved. I don't know that I can love a book anymore. Nothing subsequently can really ever touch the love I have for Winnie the Pooh, because it's the first one.
And there was so much write about it. From the, I mean, you're talking about the way that he wrote, but even the use of capital letters, where, you know, Eeyore was having a very bad day, and it's capital A, capital V. And does the Valentine family do poo sticks?
I've played poo sticks with the children, with my children. I don't know that I did. I can't remember doing it as a kid, but yes, you've been somewhere. You go, it's a bridge. We can play poo sticks. Let's go.
So that man in 1920 was writing a kiddies book, and then in 2018 I'll be walking through Tasmania, and you go exactly. Oh, it's a bridge. And all my kids run off, get a stick.
That's right. And the beautiful, but also like the characters are so distinct in Winnie the Pooh, which is I don't know if that's. I'm going to say that's rare in those sort of books. I don't know that that's exactly accurate, but like how consistent and accurate is Eeyore all the time, and how often do you think you meet someone and go, they're a bit Eeyore, aren't they? You know, or how often do you meet someone? How often do you have to work with someone who's Tigger?
Yeah,
you know, a little bit over enthusiastic, not very effective.
So my missus says that I am Tigger, which is what my son would call a complisalt.
Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah.
And my dad, God love him, he passed away 3 years ago. He would read me those books, and he would always read Eeyore in his Eeyore voice.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
And that is one of my strongest memories of Dad. Now,
can you do your dad's Eeyore voice?
I can't. It's my birthday.
That's right.
And all I've got is a balloon.
That's right. I had to there was something, it was like a fundraiser, and you had to read something out, you know, it was that sort of thing, come along and read a piece of your favourite thing. And I read the last chapter of The House of Pooh Corner, where Christopher Robin says farewell to Winnie the Pooh. Not a dry eye in the house, including me.
I know.
Like, you just start crying because it's so beautiful, and it captures so much, that moment of realisation. You know, you can, I don't know if you can remember it, but you can relate immediately to the feeling. You're 6 or 7, or you're 5, and you're going to school, and suddenly it's like, I'm not really a baby anymore, am I? I'm not. Oh, I've got to be different now. You know.
So you were in tears on stage.
Yeah. That was terrible. It was a ghastly moment for all.
How horrible. Control yourself, man. But I've got an embarrassing confession about Winnie the Pooh, which is I'm sort of offended and hate anyone bringing it into the modern world. I just want those hardback
the Disney
books.
version.
Well, any version. I want the books with the drawings that you described, you know, slightly moth-eaten. I don't want it on screen. I don't want it on radio. I just want, you know, my dad reading it to me, basically.
Well, yeah, I'm not as hard and fast about that. I tried to read them to my children, for example, and gave them to my children to read. They couldn't read it. We're too distant from that style of language. Beatrix Potter, the same. These sort of the Gumnuts, May Gibbs stuff. When you look at the language now, people are speaking so differently, and the style of language. It was a glorious day in the forest as we went off to have a walk. You know, it just. The whole rhythm of the sentence is just so contrary to how anybody speaks or writes today that they can't see it. Like, my kids can't see a black and white film either.
Right.
It doesn't. They just go, what is wrong with this film?
so unless it starts in this sex tape, I will be showing.
Right. That's right. Yeah. They security footage from the corner they can understand. So I'm not hard and fast about that. I can understand that it might take a while. You mightn't be able to get to it until you've had more experience. That it's like, you know, you play a scratchy jazz record from the 1920s to the 1950s. I can get it, but it's taken me a long time to be able to understand what's going on there. I don't expect my kid to suddenly go, "Oh, Charlie Parker, how magnificent!"
Jamila Rizvi is an author, presenter and sought-after public speaker. A past advisor to both the Rudd and Gillard governments, she has been named by the Financial Review as one of the most influential women in Australia. For your second choice, we're going to come forward about 45 years, and we're going to enter a world of radically different gender politics, because you have chosen the 2011 7 million copy selling non-fiction memoir of Caitlin Moran, How to Be a Woman. Tell me about that and why you've chosen it.
I was someone who probably wouldn't have called myself a feminist as a teenager. I look back on my politics at that point and I really feel uncomfortable and a little bit cringy about it. But I think coming through university, becoming involved in politics and seeing the realities of what workplaces in particular are like for women meant that I had a real crash landing into feminism. And Caitlin Moran was a little bit like my white girl introduction. I think she really, with that book, with humour and care, opened my eyes at the time of reading it to a level of recognition of patriarchy and what was going on in the world that perhaps I hadn't really twigged onto. And the reason I chose it is at that moment in time, I think it really broadened my political horizons around feminism. And then within a few years, I think I'd moved beyond it to a point that I would look back on it and feel like, no, this is feminism for middle class white girls. This isn't the inclusive kind of feminism that I want to be a part of. And so I still find it incredibly valuable because I think it was a bit like a gateway drug for me.
Sure.
But now being a bit older and a bit more evolved, I suppose, in my own thinking, I can also see a lot of what's wrong with it.
And can you talk to me a little bit about that? I mean, I read that at the time, the How to Be a Woman. It got me in trouble actually in my book club because I chose it as the book. It's quite a blokey book club. They go, "What do you want about Nigel?" But can you tell me about where it's evolved to? The difference between the Jamila Moran feminism and the Jamila Now feminism.
Yeah, I think Caitlin Moran, I think, is incredibly useful for particularly younger women who are coming to feminism for the first time and are seeing it through the prism of their own world and what's happening to them. So are very focused on what's happening to them at work, what's happening to them at home, the way they're valued in society for how they look above how they act or how they behave, and the expectations that we place on little girls, on teenage girls in a variety of ways that I think force them into these very tight stereotypical boxes. And Caitlin Moran, I think, is also very good at punching out of the very middle upper class space of white feminism, in that she is more inclusive in that regard. She talks about being from a working class background. She talks about unionism. So I think in that regard, the book's great. It's funny, it's warm, and it's very personal. But it is a very individualized feminism. And I think over time, you start to see and understand the intersections of your feminism and going beyond how it might be good for you and more how patriarchy can actually help white women and has done for a long time. So I think a lot more reading and a lot more understanding, and I think I've been doing that at the same time as most of the world has, right?
Sure.
It feels like we're all still catching up in this space, and I still feel like I'm playing catch up, and I'm still that person that picks up a book and makes notes in the margins and realizes the failings of my own concepts.
In 1987, I think it was, I read Andrea Dworkin's Intercourse. Have you read any of
that? Yes.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, I haven't got a clue. So where would you, to somebody who's listening to this, who wants to be a helpful influence as much as they can be in the issue, who wants to, I understand that I can't understand, if that makes sense,
Yes.
but I'd like to be a good bloke and a better bloke, is where would you recommend, what texts and authors that someone would start with? Not to be a fully evolved, the solution, but you go, take an unreconstructed bloke, where would you recommend someone who wants to join in would start?
I think that's a wonderful question to start off with, because I think wanting to learn, wanting to be better is absolutely the starting point for anything, right? And I think too often when we talk about discrimination and groups in our society who are disadvantaged for whatever reason, those of us who are in the group that is advantaged tend to think the best thing we can do is a lot of talking, when I suspect the best thing we can do is a lot of listening.
Sure.
And reading is absolutely the best way for us to start with that. So where would I begin? I'd actually start on social media. Don't dip into books first. Start with columns. Start with dipping in and out so you can hear as many voices as you can. I would start changing up who you look to. Here in Australia, I would start by reading the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I would be listening to Indigenous activists like Tila Reid or Nakia Louie. To make sure that you've done your history, I'd be going back and reading some Virginia Woolf. I would be reading in more a modern perspective. I'd be looking to Tara June Winch or Maxine Beneba Clark. Roxane Gay, Bad Feminist, is, I think, really becoming a real seminal text in this space, if you can say that for something that's only a few years old. A little bit of Rebecca Traister probably wouldn't go astray.
This is fantastic because
I can give you a long list.
Well, this is great because where I would start as you know, I'm just stereotypical me, whatever I am. I like Tina Fey, Bossy Pants, and the Gina Davis Institute. So I'm probably looking at the wrong places. I haven't even heard of half the people you've mentioned. So I will be writing them down when I re-listen to this and
Having said that, I love the work the Gina Davis Institute do. The work they do unpicking film
on the
and
Disney
what we're
cartoons.
showing little girls is just mind-blowing.
It's brilliant. So the Disney cartoon, it just spun my head around where you get the Bechdel test. You know the Bechdel test, which I laugh my arse off. I just love that, where you go, how can a film not have two women have a conversation not about a man ever? It's just incredible.
So women characters are less likely to appear in crowd scenes. Women characters are less likely to have a name in a script. They usually have other interactions with women to discuss a man, as you say, where they have interactions with men. They are almost always sexualized or infantilized, or they're servants.
Yes.
So once you start looking, I think, at content and at film and television with that kind of lens, you can't unsee it anymore, right? And it becomes as stark as when you sit down, and I've got a 5-year-old boy, and I'll pick up a book to read him that I remember loving as a kid, and you get 5 pages in and you're like, this is not appropriate anymore.
Very good. Well, listen, you're going to make me a better man because I'm going to go off and try and research some of those names that you've mentioned. So thank you for that.
You are most welcome. I'm happy to provide an even longer list.
Thank you for listening to The Five of My Life, presented by me, Nigel Marsh. Our producer is Mandy Coolan. Theme music is thanks to Darcy Thompson and Matt Nicholish. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share with a friend. And if there's someone you'd like to hear take the challenge, please message us on the Five of My Life Instagram page. I love hearing from you and appreciate all your suggestions.